Well, it's good to be with y'all today, and we're gonna do a little interchange here for a little bit, and then probably about 12:30 or so, we'll open it up to questions. So be thinking about the questions you'd like to ask a very, very successful engineer who had a wonderful career and did a lot of very, very interesting things. And I know I've been with a lot of you before, so I know that you ask good questions. So just be ready, because you're going to get an opportunity to ask them. And I'd like to start out by just asking Charles a few questions. And one would be engineering. Out of all of the different things that you could choose to study, why engineering?
Well, I always had a great interest in science. As a young person, probably middle school age, my interest was mostly in the area of science, chemistry in particular, atomic energy, nuclear energy, and I had intended, as I got into high school, to have a career as a chemist. But as a matter of fortune or God's providence, at an Eagle Scout banquet, my host was a chemist from DuPont in Old Hickory, Tennessee. And he was there, of course, to talk to me about, this is what chemists do, this is my career, answer questions. And very early in that discussion at dinner, he said, have you thought about being a chemical engineer? I thought, no, I don't know anything about engineering. And he said, well, I think if you look into it, you'll find that, engineers really have a lot of opportunities. From a career standpoint, you can do so many different things with an engineering degree. Even though I'm a chemist, I work with chemical engineers at the plant, and I just see that they have so many more career opportunities, and would encourage you to think about that. So I thought about that. And I must admit, he said, engineers, in addition to having all these opportunities, they make more money. Well, that sounded pretty good. Good career opportunities, challenging work, and certainly competitive pay. And that was when I decided to be an engineer. And I'm certainly glad that I made that decision.
Chemical engineering's got to be one of the harder engineering fields. I was never very good at chemistry, but our wives are sitting at the back of the room there. My wife spent 3 years studying chemical engineering, and I really liked her because she did research in a lab that they were researching doing liquefied coal, and she would come home, we would go on a date, and she smelled like coal. So that was sort of her perfume of the day. Chemical engineers are in a lot of interesting environments, and how many of you in the room? Any of you in the room go to Lipscomb Academy? So you might be interested to know Charles, is a Lipscomb Academy graduate as well. So you have that in common with him. So after you graduated from the academy, you got this advice at this Eagle Scout banquet, and it sounded good to you. And so then what happened next? What did you do with that advice?
Well, I started thinking about, where can I go to school to get this engineering degree? And for me and my family, it was really a financial decision. I really had two choices. I applied to several schools, University of Tennessee and Vanderbilt. And, finances were difficult. And my parents had to make a lot of sacrifices to send me anywhere, really. But at the time, believe it or not, I could go to Vanderbilt and live at home for about what it would cost for me to go to UT or some other school and have room and board and everything associated with it. So Vanderbilt costs have obviously gone out the roof. But I must admit, it's been over 50 years since I left Lipscomb Academy. So as you can imagine, there'll be a little bit of inflation over that time. So anyway, unlike today when a lot of students and their parents work really, really hard to select a university, to visit schools, to, certainly do testing, and it's a huge deal to select the university. I'd have to be honest with you and tell you 50 years ago, I filled out the applications and mailed them and assumed I was going to get in somewhere. So that wasn't something I worked really hard then. If I was doing it today or had children at that age and was doing it today, I'd certainly work harder. But anyway, I decided to go to Vanderbilt, was accepted there and started in the chemical engineering program. And as David said, chemical engineering is not the easiest engineering degree to get. We started out with a huge class at Vanderbilt of chemical engineers. And even by the sophomore year, it had shrunk considerably. And then by the junior year, there was about 35 or so. So, it might be if you had it to do over again, it might have been a civil engineer or something like that. Not that that's easy, but we had 5 labs a week, and process labs, chemistry labs, and it's just a very intense course.
So I took one civil engineering class, and all I remember is just build everything with triangles. Is that sort of it? You got to use triangles, right? So I was an electrical engineer. So you ended up at Vanderbilt. You did some internship with what eventually became Exxon. And you decide to go there to work at an entry-level job in engineering, and I'm sure they probably hire hundreds of engineers a year.
Yeah.
And somewhere 30 years later, you're sort of at the top of the corporation in one of the most senior positions. What, early in those first 2, 3, 5 years of your career, what are the things that you did? What are the opportunities that came along? What is it that prepared you to move in such a way in your career at Exxon?
Well, first of all, I went to work for the company that I had worked for in the summer as an intern. And I did that primarily because of the people that I worked with that summer. I had a great experience in that that summer I was involved in installing vapor recovery compression on a number of Galveston Bay oil platforms. So, I had to size the units and select the units and do the piping and the drawings, work the economics to justify that, sell it to the management. And all that was new and interesting, applying some of what I'd learned, but also applying other skills. So I think I was fortunate when I went to work that I knew something about the company. I knew I liked the employees. I felt like they shared many of the same values that I had. And so for me, starting my first permanent job, I felt like I had a bit of a head start. And then early in my career, I was fortunate in having a number of different types of assignments. I worked in the production department. Some of you may have heard Terry Kuntz speak at one of these programs, and he also worked for Exxon and worked in production. But there's a variety of roles in production. You can be sort of focusing on petroleum engineering, reservoir engineering, subsurface engineering, or you can do drilling as an engineer, or you can build and design and build facilities as a production engineer. So unlike working in a plant environment in a refinery or chemical plant where you may be assigned to one unit within that overall process, and you might work on that unit for a number of years, production offered a variety of experiences. On the downside, I think I moved several times the first 6 years, relocated, physical relocation, which is not necessarily a plus, but part of getting that sort of broad geographic experience. The other thing I'd say is that, and again, it's God's providence, but I was fortunate to work with some other engineers and managers who in their own right became very successful in the company. And having worked with them as a young engineer over a period of time, you tend to remember people that worked hard, did a good job, and when opportunities come along, you know, your name may be on a list of people being considered for that role, and they'll remember you. And so again, the mentors you have during your career, especially I think early in the career, are very important. You know, I'd say you hear about front-end loading in terms of project activity. You want to front-end load with planning and so forth. I'd say you want to front-end load your career. You know, the first 5 or 10 years is sort of the launching pad for your future career growth. I stayed with one corporation my entire career. Today, that may not be the norm. But, you know, when you do stay with one corporation, getting a good start, showing people what your capabilities are early on, and then having consistent high level of performance over a period of time, you know, I think gets you on the right trajectory to have a very, very satisfying career. And that's true whether you're interested in a purely technical advancement or whether you're interested in being a manager in that business. I'm convinced engineers can do anything, and I mean anything. You know, you take your taxes to a CPA and they say, you know, engineers don't need to bring their taxes to a CPA. That may or may not be true, by the way, but that's what I've been told. But anyway, I really do believe that, you know, engineers can be successful in so many avenues. Because you've been trained, you probably start out being interested in analytical work. You're trained problem solvers. You know, you're probably driven to make a difference. And all those attributes are important no matter what you end up doing for your career. So it's probably a long answer to a question.
No, so you mentioned analytical skills, problem solving skills, which is kind of right at the heart of what we learn in school as engineering students. The foundation, I know when I graduated, I felt like, man, am I really ready to go be an engineer? But people convinced me, yeah, you can do this. But so you have those engineering skills that you bring in, but what are the other important skill sets that maybe aren't as obvious to a young engineer? What are the other skill sets that they need to learn and develop to have a successful career?
Well, I mean, to me, the most important is communication skills. And I think when Terry Kuntz talked to you, he probably talked about communications. And not just oral communications, but also written communications are critical. No matter how smart or how creative you may be as an engineer, you've got to be able to explain what you're proposing. You've got to be able to sell what you're proposing. And if you're not a clear communicator, that can be very difficult. Also, written communications turned out to be extremely important. At least within my experience, anytime we wanted to spend any significant amount of money, we had to justify it. And the skills required to justify making a capital investment involve, first of all, knowing and understanding economics and understanding discounted cash flows and rates of returns and return on capital, because that company is in business and, you know, needs to make a return. So you need to have communication skills, but also all these proposals, especially when they involve hundreds of millions or even billion-dollar investments for a corporation, have to be written. You know, they have to be reviewed and go up the line to senior management, and then in many cases to the board for approval. So that means you have to have good writing skills. And I remember in Vanderbilt taking a course in technical writing when I think I was a freshman, and I don't know if you take that course or not, but it was useless. It really was. It did not help me one iota. I'm sure you have an improved version of that.
I'm sure we do.
My point being is the focus of that technical writing was just highly technical. And how you would write up almost a patent application. Well, that's not what most engineers do. I'm sure there are engineers that do those things. And I think the advantage you have here at Lipscomb in the engineering school, from what I know, is you're very applications oriented. You know, you're not off here, you know, trying to train a bunch of PhD research people per se, but engineers who can analyze problems, solve problems, and then make a difference in what you're doing. And that kind of writing skill, you know, is different. And, you know, your English class, which you may or may not enjoy, is probably going to help you, or your literature course, or some course in arts and science may end up helping you write up these justifications or economic things better than a purely technical approach. So, communications, oral and written, interpersonal skills, teamwork. I don't know any engineers who achieve a lot of success by themselves, you know, working in a vacuum. Some guys like process engineers do a lot of really technical work, but even they interact with other engineers. In the production department, we interacted not only with a lot of other engineers, but with geoscientists, geophysicists, geologists, and so interpersonal skills, the ability to be a good team member is a fantastic skill. One of the things that I wish I did better was listen. You know, one of the things someone told me one time was, I never learned anything when I was talking. I'd think about that, but you know, that's right. If I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm not learning anything. You may or may not be learning anything, but it is so true. And I'm not a real good listener. And so, you know, thinking about it, a big part of communication skills is being an effective listener. Communication, interpersonal skills, some economic literacy, being a good team member, learning how to work in a group, and that's something I think you do here really well. When I was in engineering school back in the dark ages, it didn't even get a mention. There was nothing that I took as a student in university that would really help me with those skills. You either had them or learned them on the job. Sort of the survival of the fittest, I guess. So those are some other things besides purely technical, and I would say that, you know, they're at least as important as a purely technical skills. Because when you go to work, you're going to be surrounded, if you're in a larger company, by a lot of really, really smart people. And in the environment I was in, it was mostly engineers. And so pretty much everybody brought the same technical capabilities. Obviously, there's some better than others, but these other factors, these other skills were the things that kind of differentiated.
Right. Make a difference in your career. Just out of curiosity, y'all probably taken personality tests. How many of you show up kind of an introverted kind of scale? So probably about 2/3 of the room just looking around, which doesn't surprise me at all. I'm an introvert as well. I don't know, Charles, what you would show up on a personality test, but so really working hard in spite of that natural tendency to be able to get out of that shell, communicate, interact with other people, I think as Charles has said, is really, really, really critical in your skill, a skill set to learn as you progress through your careers. So mention very quickly, if you can, all the different places you lived in your career.
Well, in Texas, I've lived in Houston, I've lived Midland, Texas, I've lived in Pensacola, Florida, Worked 2 years in Alaska. I've lived in Australia for almost 10 years. There's probably some other ones.
So one of the things there, and he talked about a little bit earlier, but is the willingness to take some risks and do some different things in your career, but both either seeking them out, depending on the kind of firm you work in, seeking out those opportunities, or being willing to accept those opportunities when presented to you to go do something different in a different place. You're going to learn so much that it'll be really very valuable to your career. So when you look back on your career, what would you do different if you were starting over again today based on what you learned in 38 years of working in the engineering and energy industry? What would you do different if you started out today?
Well, one of the things I've already mentioned is I would try to be a better listener. Another one would be I would try to be more patient and recognizing that if you're trying to change an organization, you're trying to share a vision, get people to buy into that, develop strategies and execute it. It's not going to happen overnight. And looking back, I was probably impatient to get to where I thought we as an organization needed to be. And it was only when I went to Australia and interacted with a somewhat different culture did I become a little more thoughtful about how you go about getting from A to B, and accepting the fact that that's going to take time. Another one on a more personal is, probably my work and family balance was not as balanced toward the family as it should have been. If you're working in a big company or corporation in a competitive environment, if you allow yourself, you can work 24/7. And, probably many of us get kind of caught up into that rat race, or what do you want to call it, and you forget about priorities. Another one was in working, I really never recognized that my job was also my mission field. I only really started thinking about that after I retired and went to a seminar, and there was a discussion about, where do you spend your time? Where you spend your time is where you interact with people and you have an opportunity to influence people. And I'd recognize that from a business standpoint. But from a Christian standpoint, I really didn't recognize that. And it struck me because I had an employee who, tremendously successful employee, happens to be one of the senior vice presidents of the corporation now, worked for me, and he had a Bible on his desk. He never said anything about it, but if you happen to notice when he came to work, the first thing he did when he came to work was read from the Bible. And then he'd just leave it open to whatever he was reading. And people come and go. He was a manager and vice president of one of our areas. And you couldn't help but notice his Bible on his desk, which sometimes prompted conversations and sometimes didn't. But he never hit anybody over the head with his Bible. He never made a big deal about it. But he was very influential in making a statement without really making a statement verbally. So again, kind of in the twilight of my career, it struck me that way.
Yeah.
I have really missed an opportunity because I spent the majority of my life probably at work and was interacting with all kinds of people. And of course, a corporation doesn't want you to be there evangelizing the workforce, if you would. That's not what they're paying you for. But he found a way to do it that was not threatening to anyone, that didn't offend anyone, and didn't make a difference. The other thing he did was he sent out Christmas cards And every Christmas card I ever received from him had a scripture verse. And he was thoughtful about, he didn't put the same scripture verse on everybody's Christmas card. He was thoughtful enough about, intentional enough, I guess is the right word, that it was specially chosen verse for you.
Yeah.
So here's someone younger, someone ultimately more successful in our corporation who made a difference. And so if I had to do over again, I don't know that I would be that good, but I would make more of an effort to recognize the opportunity that God's put in front of me and to take advantage of those opportunities.
That's great advice looking back, and good reflection of a 38-year career. So we want to take the rest of the time to let you ask Charles some questions. And so who's going to be the first? Yes, sir.
So you talked about your career and expanded it a lot and some of the skills you developed early in your career. What would you say about the transition between your early career and moving more into management roles? How did you manage that? What advice would you give for looking forward? How can we set up our career early in a career if we plan on doing something like that?
Okay?
Did everybody hear the question? Say yes, no, maybe, it'll go faster. Yes? Okay.
Well, I was able to become what they call a first-line supervisor with about 3.5 years experience. And at the time, and again, put this in perspective, this was many years ago, our organization in production department, we had headquarters, we had division, we had district offices. So we had a lot of engineers spread out and a lot of opportunities for supervising engineers where you'd have maybe 6 or 7 or 8 engineers reporting to you. That was a huge advantage because it gave me a chance to develop some supervisory skills and some managerial skills very, very early in my career. Today, if I look at the production department, you know, it's much more centralized, doesn't have all the different levels, it's flatter, and they don't have as many offices. So there aren't as many of those opportunities now. And it would be more difficult to get early supervisory experience. But that really did help me. But if you have that opportunity as an engineer, you need to seriously think about it, even if you're not convinced, I want to be a manager. I mean, because I really like the technical work that I do. You know, I ought to seriously consider doing that, because you might find that, number one, you enjoy it, and number two, that you're good at it. And it will certainly help you develop some skills that you then can use as you advance up the technical ladder, even if that's what you ultimately choose to do.
Yeah, good advice. I mean, getting that opportunity to supervise other people, other engineers, you're either going to find out you like it or you don't like it, but you ought to try it. Okay, it's going to make you better whether or not you end up going that route or not. Who's got the next question? I'm going to bring you a mic. All right, over here.
So working in a big company like ExxonMobil, you obviously work with a lot of different disciplines, not just within engineering, but inside, outside, all around engineering, business people, communicators, the like. What is the best way, what are the best leadership lessons that you've learned in leading a team that is multidisciplinary and this diverse in that sense, where everybody brings a little something different?
Okay, Dave, can you repeat just the last part?
So, learning to lead a multidisciplinary group of people, what are the lessons you learned in trying to do that? As an engineer, you ended up also leading people with all kinds of different skill sets and backgrounds.
Well, back to my hobby horse of listening. You know, if you've got geoscientists, geophysicists that are reporting to you, which I did, you got marketers reporting to you, which I did. You've got, you know, technical engineer and manager reporting to you. You have to really listen and trust your experts. They have a discipline that they're specialist in, they're trained in, they're expert in. That doesn't mean you don't question them and challenge them. And the more you work with people with a different discipline, you know, whether they're geoscientists or accountants, the more confident you are that you can ask good questions and probe and make sure you understand what they're recommending. But at the end of the day, if you're not the expert in that area, you know, you run a pretty high risk if you don't pay attention to them.
Who's got the next question? Over here. I'm gonna go over to the far side. On the journey over, I'll tell you, we were chatting a little bit at lunch. A lot of you will end up being married at some point, and one of the pieces of advice is that our wives would pass on to you, whether you're a male or a female engineer, is there's a point in time in your marriage when you need to turn off that problem-solving skill set. Your spouse is not a problem to be solved, okay? So just
I think they call that the wedding gift.
just passing along just a little friendly, helpful advice on the journey to the next question. So.
Yeah, so this is about listening. I'm just wondering, like, there are some people who will just kind of talk, and like you said, when you talk, you don't learn anything. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you find a balance between listening and just kind of like shutting out the people that just kind of ramble?
Could you hear the question?
I'm also not very tactful, as my wife can attest to. So I probably would say, you know, we need to move on, or you know, let's let somebody else, you know, tell us what they think about it. But it's not it's a good question, and it's not an easy thing to do. But generally, you know, if someone wants to just keep on talking about a subject, you know, especially if it's technical, they're really trying to impress you and show you how much they know. And they're not really focused on why we're here, which is to make a decision to do something or not do something. So you try to redirect them back to, okay, well, how does that pertain to the decision that we need to make?
And if you're the boss of that person, which frequently is the case in a meeting, somebody's willing to tell you how to build the clock as opposed to what time it is, there's a coaching moment, maybe outside of that meeting, but you need to coach the employees. Like, okay, you know, people are not going to want you around because you're telling them more than they need to know and want to know and have time to know. So if you're the boss, you got to be willing to really help people and be honest with them about what's not working in the business.
That's a good point, David. This is really critical in Australia, because here in the U.S., there's still a fair amount of recognition of hierarchy, and you're the boss. So people will tend to listen to you because you're in that position. In Australia, in large degree due to their culture, they see you as a boss as somebody to challenge. And you have to convince them that you deserve to be in that position. You can't just know what you want to do. You got to be able to explain to them, to their satisfaction, why you want to do it and why they should want to do it. So I really learned that lesson in the time I spent in Australia was, you know, you got to back up and explain to people what you're trying to accomplish, and then you've got to listen to them, and then you got to get their buy-in, and then once you've done that, okay, maybe you can start to implement.
When working in a team environment, how do you deal with people that would like to drag their feet and not really pull their own weight?
Would like to drag what?
They like to drag their feet and not really pull their own weight.
He said he wasn't tactful.
Yeah, I'm trying to develop new skills. I'm not sure there's an easy solution to that. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind, and I'm not trying to be flippant, is I try to get on a different team. Or I try to transfer them to work for someone else. You know, that's transferring your problem, and that's not really a good company solution. You know, maybe David's answer on this last one would be right. Is okay, they're not pulling their weight, they're not contributing as a team member outside the team environment. You just very honestly, you know, say, look, I think you could contribute a lot more, or you could do a lot more, or we really need your help. Like to see you be more involved in, a next meeting or something like that. Again, I don't think I was ever that tactful, but that sounded like a good answer.
You got the next question? All right.
I just would like to hear. I'd like to hear any experiences you've had where your ethics were brought right into the front of your mind in a business situation where.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you asking that question because I meant to say something about the importance of personal and corporate ethics, integrity. I think my employer was a highly ethical company, and I think that because I saw us pass on some business opportunities that clearly would have been profitable to the corporation, but involved the questionable ethics. And that situation, the first 20 years of my 38-year career I spent working within the U.S., all over the U.S., but within the U.S. The last 18 plus years I spent working in the international business environment. And this becomes much more of an issue dealing with countries like Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Russia. Not that they're the only places. Companies that we dealt with, and I'll think of the Italians and the French, their business ethics are different, and I would say questionable in some cases. And when you deal with foreign governments, whether it be in the Mideast or the Caspian or South America, there are situations where either the government's looking for a payoff or a bribe or do business with my brother's company. You run into that, or I did, a lot more internationally and in certain countries. And you just have to say no. And then you have to be confident that your employer is going to back you up. And I'd say my employer went beyond that by telling me constantly, this is how we want to do business. Safety was our number one priority, and we acted like it. Business ethics, was right behind that. And so ethical business dealings, whether they're at a personal level or a corporate level, are critical. And over time, even though the government, you may miss some opportunities, I really do think you build respect within the industry and within the world. That this company, has highly competent technical people, but they're only going to do business in this way. They're not going to be willing. We lost some really attractive acreage in Brazil because we wouldn't do business the way the Brazilians want to do business. But many times, 10, 15 years down the road, you'll see that that's come back to haunt the companies. So again, in your own personal conduct, you have to have the highest ethics. And clearly the values that you're learning here are consistent with that.
Well, thank you for your questions. Let's, you don't get your name put on a building on a university campus for giving $2.95. So the Fields have been very, very generous lead contributors to the new building that many of you, most of you, are going to get to enjoy. And he's also done a great job of sharing his wealth of knowledge with you today. Let's let Charles know that we appreciate it.
Art, thank you so much for being our executive in residence also today. And we have a little gift for you as well, something to remember this day by. And look forward to the groundbreaking in just a little bit.
Right, I do too. We're excited about it. I hope you are. We talked to the professors this morning. They're clearly all excited about it. And, we've been very blessed and are just thankful that we can help support Lipscomb Engineering. So I've enjoyed my time with you. Thanks very much.